Welcome to the Alpha Male Podcast, the podcast where we talk about how to be an alpha male, strong, dominant, confident, and control, just like we're called to be by our Creator and our Savior, Jesus Christ. I am your host, Michael Melito. First and foremost, I am a Christian. God is preeminent in my life, and everything that I do in this podcast is no different. If you'd ask me who I am, I'd say first and foremost, I'm a simple man called by God to preach the good news of Jesus Christ. Now, if you want to skip through, fast forward the rest of the background and intro, you can. I'll put a link in the show notes at the bottom so you know exactly where to skip to. So who's this guy talking? Christian, a preacher, and a professional gunfighter for pretty much all of my adult life. I grew up hunting and shooting at a very early age in a small town in the South. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, where I did 2 combat tours in the Middle East in quintessential gunfighting MOS infantry. After my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. Afterwards, I went to work for LAPD, where I worked some of the nastiest streets in the country. God got me through both those things, not because I'm special or better than any of the other men who didn't, but simply because He chose to show mercy on me. I also served in the United States Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. I worked patrol assignments and some more specialized assignments in law enforcement. I've also been a private contractor for the federal government. Before what I'm doing now, I was very blessed to be the commander of an SRT team, a special response team, where our primary job was to stop active shooters. I'm an FBI firearms instructor, NRA, and some other firearms certifications, more than I care to mention. Before I joined the Marine Corps, even at 17, I had started shooting and winning shooting competitions. I've been very blessed to win and compete in a ton of different shooting disciplines, anything from precision rifle to action pistol, steel challenge, USPSA, muzzleloader, archery. Been very blessed to take part in all of that. I've hunted all over this beautiful country, everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast and mule deer on the West Coast, and, anything from bear to elk to wolf, any number of exotics I've been able to hunt and guide for. Bison and fallow deer and axis. A big part of what I do right now is a professional hunter and guide. Left the big city and the high-paying job to come out in the country and be a professional hunter and guide. Not many people today are blessed to be able to say that they've been a professional hunter and guide of things like buffalo and deer, but I am very blessed to be able to say that. Today's topic is going to be one of the greatest plagues to ever plague mankind. No, it's not coronavirus. No, it's not even the Black Death. It's fear. I would submit that fear is one of the greatest plagues to ever plague mankind. Since Adam and Eve sinned in the garden and hid themselves because they were afraid, because they were naked, since then, fear has been plaguing mankind. Throughout history, throughout cultures, fear has plagued mankind. How does this pertain to being an alpha male? Well, I want you to think in your head of any great man that you think of in history. Anyone that's an example to you of an alpha male. Think about them. Okay, so you've probably thought of 1 or 2 examples. Now, what came to mind? Did you think, man, that guy was just afraid of everything? I mean, he was just paralyzed by fear. He didn't do anything. He could have done this and could have done that, but he was too afraid. I doubt that's what came to mind. When we think of alpha males, we think of bravery. We think of men that face and overcome fear. When I was still a young man, I was in ROTC even before I joined the Marine Corps, and we learned the 14 leadership traits, and I still remember them and their definitions pretty closely. And the definition of courage is to face and overcome fear. Think of any of the great warriors in history. You don't think of them as being fearful, as being afraid. Think of the Spartans in the 300, whether that story is true or not. It's great because, in spite of all their odds, in spite of everything they faced, they overcame their fear. Think about who we have today. I mean, I was a Marine, so think about the Marine Corps. Do you think, oh man, the Marines, they're great. They're afraid of everything. They run from every battle. They surrender all the time. Of course not. They are remarkable, the great warriors and the great men throughout history. Whether it's physical battle, actual warfare, or other types of warfare. Those men stand out as alpha males to us because of their bravery, because they beat fear, because they don't succumb to it. Think of any great athlete. Do you think Michael Phelps, when he stands before he jumps into the pool, I'm not super familiar with whatever events that he does, but before he jumps into the pool, do you think he looks at that water and thinks, man, I'm going to drown. I might die. I better not do that. Think of someone like Usain Bolt. Before he runs a race, do you think he's sitting there focusing on, man, I might twist an ankle and really hurt myself? No, he's focused on other things. He's not letting fear beat him. He's beating fear into submission. You likewise do the same. Now, I've been in a lot of fights in my life. All kinds. I didn't grow up a Christian, and I'm not perfect. I've been in some fights that I probably shouldn't have been. But I can try and share some beneficial things with you here today. If you get in a fist fight, you're probably going to get punched in the face. I mean, maybe not, but you just assume that that's going to happen. If you're afraid of getting punched, there's a good chance you're not going to win that fight. You just accept it and you don't fear it. Now, you should never go out and seek fights that aren't just. But if you need to get in a fight, you better plan on winning it. And you know what's not going to help you win it? Fear. In fact, you're more likely to get injured if you're afraid. You're more likely to get injured if you're afraid than if you're strong and dominant and confident. Get in that fight, you say? Yeah, I might get hit in the face. Bring it. I've been hit in the face before, more times than I can honestly remember, and I've hit more people in the face than I can honestly remember. It's just a thing that happens, but I'm not going to be afraid of it. Think of this. More like a movie scene in reality, because I've certainly never been in a gunfight like this. But, you know, Old West style, two men standing out in the middle of the street in a small town. It's about to be high noon. They're going to be in a duel. Assuming you don't know anything about their talent, skills, or abilities, or God's will, you got one man that's just sitting there thinking, man, I might get shot. Man, I might get shot. I might die. This might be the last, hour of my life. What happens to this? What happens to that? Fear and trembling. And the other man's thinking, focus on the front sight. Focus on the front sight. Slow, steady squeeze. Which one of those do you think, honestly, is going to win that fight? That's one of the things that fear does. It takes your mind off what you should be focused on and distracts you with something else. Now, all men are subject to this, I'd say, except Jesus Christ. But we all feel fear. But don't be ruled by fear. It's one of the great things about being a Christian. And I warned you in the beginning it was going to come out in everything that I do. We're called in the Word of God to fear one thing, and that's fear God. Fear God, the goodness and severity of God. Show godly reverence for your Creator and all the things that He can do. It's the one thing we're called to fear. Everything else, we're called to not fear. Do not be afraid is mentioned so many times in the Bible. By Jesus, by the angels when they come. That's one of the first things they say. And do you know why? Because it's man's inclination to fear. But they say, do not be afraid. So many beautiful verses in scriptures I'd advise you to look up. But as it says in the Word, I shall not fear. What can man do to me? This is Luke chapter 12, I say to you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that have no more they can do. But I will show you whom you shall fear. Fear him who after he has killed has the power to cast into hell. Yes, I say, fear him. You're called to fear God. But that's the great thing. That's the only thing. You're not called to fear any man. No man. Call no man master. Do not tremble before any man. Do not bow down to any man. You show respect. You show honor to the people older than you, to your father, to your mother. But you're not called to fear anyone but God and God alone. No beast, no lion, no tiger, no bear, no element, not water, not fire. You shall not fear. You shall not be afraid. Deuteronomy chapter 1, you shall not be afraid in any man's presence. That's a commandment. You shall not be afraid in any man's presence. Genesis chapter 9, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth. Now the law was given for your good. As I mentioned in the bio, I've been very blessed to hunt things like bison and wolf and very large elk and things that in the natural are much bigger and stronger than a man. But I tell you what, if you face them down with no fear, they know it. They know when you're afraid of them and when you're not afraid of them. Do not be afraid. Do not submit to fear. I will caution this with, also, don't be an idiot. God also says, do not put the Lord your God to the test. Jesus says that when he's being tested by the devil. Don't try and jump off a 10-story building and be like, oh, I'm not afraid. That's putting your God to the test. Don't put your head in an alligator's mouth and let go with your hands and be like, I'm not afraid. That's putting your God to the test. Now, if you have to face an alligator, being afraid of him is not going to help you win that battle. I would advise you to never go looking for a fight. But if you have to fight another man, being afraid of that man will not help you win that fight. And there's another saying, not a Christian saying, but all wisdom comes from God. Fortune favors the bold. What great man in history can you think of where you're like, he never took a chance, he never stepped out, he always did the most cautious thing that he could do? Look at this very clear example. You're an alpha male. Let's say you're not married yet, and you're going to ask a girl out that you really like. First of all, you have to get the courage to ask said woman out. Some advice that my father gave me, if you don't ask, the answer is automatically no. You have to get the courage to ask her. So often in life as men, we fear things that really aren't even going to hurt us. What's the worst that that girl can say? No. Is she going to embarrass you? Have you never been embarrassed? I get embarrassed all the time. I screw stuff up all the time, guys. Don't live in fear of looking stupid or being told no. If you don't ask that girl out, the answer is automatically no. Let me tell you a story about a man at the gym. And no disrespect to this man, I won't even mention his name or what gym or anything like that. But I've been working out. I don't work out at a gym anymore. I pretty much work out at home. Very blessed to have my own gym. But anyway, I was at a pretty prevalent gym. I've been working out for 20 odd years and very blessed to be very healthy and fit. And this man comes up to me and wants help, said he's just getting started working out. I say, great. You know what, we get to talking, and he's like, whatever, this and that. I was like, well, let's try on this machine. Let's get you doing a bench press. And I put a certain amount of weight on the bench press, and the man looks at it, and he says, oh, I can't do that. He just straight up, so he didn't even try it. He just says, I can't do that. Now, I wasn't setting this guy up for failure. I put an amount of weight on there that I thought that he ought to be able to do. And even if he couldn't do it, why wouldn't you try it? What's the worst that can happen? I'm there. I mean, you afraid you're going to look silly? I mean, that's the only thing I could come up with. But because of that fear, he didn't even try it. Which illustrates a good point. The battle always starts in your mind. Even if it manifests in your fists, in your hands, in your fingers. The battle is always won first in your mind. Before you can take any action, before your hands or feet can do anything, your brain has to send the signal. The battle is in your mind. Beat that fear into submission in your mind first, and your body will follow. As I mentioned earlier, I've been very blessed to have been in a lot of shooting competitions, and I've won a lot of them. And I tell you one thing, you win the battle first in your mind. You decide right then and there, before you pull the trigger one time in that competition, you decide, I'm winning this thing. I'm taking this home. So many competitors I've seen, they probably had the skill to win, but they didn't have the mindset to win. Champions are first champions in the mind, then it manifests in the body. This is clearly illustrated with the 4-minute mile. Now, I know for years and years, or at least this is the way I understand the story, I don't know it firsthand, but for years and years people tried to break the 4-minute mile, and everybody thought it was impossible. And this one guy didn't believe it was impossible. He set out to break it, and he broke the 4-minute mile. I can't even think of the guy's name right now, you can look it up. But shortly after he broke the 4-minute mile, a bunch of other people broke the 4-minute mile that had been trying to break it for a long time. And do you know why? Because they believed it. They accomplished it first in their mind, and their body followed. So many men in today's day and age, I believe, are paralyzed, sometimes literally in a situation or sometimes metaphorically in life, by fear in their mind. I'll read you this quote by Charles Haddon Spurgeon, one of my favorite preachers. He's long since passed on. He preached in the middle 1800s up into the early 1900s. But I'll read this quote from him. I was looking for another quote, which I'll try and paraphrase later because I never could find it. The worst evils of life are those which do not exist except in our imagination. If we had no troubles but real troubles, we should have not had a 10th part of our present sorrows. For we feel 1,000 deaths in fearing one. But the Christian, cured of this disease, fearing. How much precious time in this life is wasted on fear of things that don't even manifest. They aren't even a real thing to fear. How many men in life stay in a job that they don't like? Not because they need to, but out of fear. Fear of what other people might think if they let it go. And they spend day after day in their life, year after year, driving in traffic they can't stand, in a car that's nice that they don't even enjoy, that they don't like, to go to a job, to sit in a cubicle that they can't stand. And there's a time and a place to do things you don't like to provide for others and for your family. But they do it out of fear. Fear that's not even rational. A lot of times it's not even fear that they won't ever find another job, which I'd argue is not a rational fear, but at least it's more rational than, what will people think if I just quit my job? What will people say? Don't spend time in life fearing what other people might say. Spend time in life meditating on what God wants you to do. How many men, thinking back to my younger days and friends in high school, but I'm sure it happens to older men too, how many men stay in an unhealthy relationship just out of fear? Fear of loneliness, fear of despair, fear that they won't find somebody else. Fear of that person who they don't even want to be with and they know deep down they shouldn't be with. Fear that that person might be with somebody else. Fear that they might not find somebody else, somebody better, somebody as good, even when they know that this relationship is not healthy and not making them happy. Now, unless you're married and you've already made that choice for eternity, don't stay in an unhealthy relationship out of fear. Now, if you're married, I'll caveat you stay in that relationship because you fear the one thing you're supposed to fear, the Lord God Almighty. But other than that, you're free. How many times in life do you make a bad decision, investment decision, business decision, financial decision, out of fear? Out of just fear, irrational fear. Now, God gave us a brain and rationality, and I'd say to use those, but don't ever let fear stop you from doing something you know that you should do. look at, as I mentioned in the bio, you might guess that I kind of have a little bit to do with guns and ammo in my adult life and training and whatnot. I'm a professional firearms trainer, shooting instructor, hunter and guide. I look at the ammo situation right now, and that's the number one thing I think of is fear. Fear. People going and buying up ammo. Not because they need it, not because they want to shoot it, not because they want to train and get better, because out of fear. Some irrational fear that if they don't buy all the ammo they can find, they may not ever get it again. Now, if you have a gun, you need ammo. I get that. And you should get ammo, and you should have ammo, and you should have some ammo in reserve. But once you have that, having more ammo, if you're not going to train with it, is not going to save you. You're better off training with the ammo that you have and being good with the ammo that can fit in your magazines than having 10,000 rounds hoarded away in your closet at home and you get in a gunfight and you lose because you are too afraid to train with it. I know there's a lot of new gun owners and that's great, but I think if most people, when they went to the store, if they saw that ammo and they either bought it or not bought it because they needed it, not because, fear. I think if they gave up that fear and only got what they would normally get, then there wouldn't be an ammo shortage. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're afraid there won't be any ammo, so there's no ammo, because they're afraid there's no ammo. It's often a self-fulfilling prophecy like that. You're afraid you might get punched in the face, so you're watching the guy's hands and not his eyes, you end up getting punched in the face. You're afraid that you might lose money, so you don't do something you should do out of fear and you end up not making any money. You got a girl you really want to ask out, but you don't ask her out of fear. And then somebody else asks her out, and you didn't get her because fear. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, fear. Let's look at something else I think is plaguing America. I don't know, I'll just make up a word, suburbanization. Maybe somebody else has used it before. But a lot of men living in suburbia, miserable, having a certain kind of house, driving a certain kind of car. Not because they want to, not because they like to. If you want to drive a brand new BMW, whatever the new thing is, I don't even know, you can tell I'm not a car guy. But if that's what makes you happy, that's one thing. But if you're spending all your time to drive a car that you probably don't like and don't enjoy and spend a bunch of money on it and have a house that's 3 bedroom, 2 baths in the middle of a suburban neighborhood that you don't want to be in and a house that you don't really enjoy, are you doing that out of fear? Out of fear of what your friends or coworkers might think if you gave that up? If you live different than most other people are living? Are you living the life that God's calling you to live, that you were created to live? Or are you living a life based mostly on fear? As we talked about earlier, think of any of the other great men that you admire. I guarantee their life is not ruled by fear, was not ruled by fear if they're no longer with us. I guarantee that they did not spend their life trying to be just like everybody else. If they did that, by definition, they would not be set apart and you would not remember them as special. You remember them because they dared to be different and not be afraid. In fact, that's what the word holy means. Kadosh, set apart, to be different, peculiar. Which is precisely what God's called you to be. Set apart, different, courageous. How can you live a life without fear? Well, on this earth, you will sometimes be presented with fear. And as I told you in the bio, first and foremost, I'm a Christian. I can't separate the two. How can I live a life without fear? Because my God fights for me. If the God, the creator of heaven and earth, the God of angel armies, who created the earth in 6 days and controls everything in existence, is on my side, fighting the battles for me, what shall I be afraid of? What shall I fear? Listen to Jesus, listen to the angels, what they say. Do not be afraid. Fear no man. What does Psalms 91 say? I shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor the destruction that lays waste at noonday. 1,000 may fall at my side, 10,000 at my right hand, but it shall not come near me. You make the conscious choice to live for God and live without fear. You want to live a life without fear? You give that life to somebody strong. You give your life to God and live a bold life. The quote that I was looking for, I couldn't remember what sermon it was from Charles Spurgeon or maybe in one of his books, but it was a simple quote. He said, "You're not called to live like a toad under a harrow." If you've ever seen some kind of animal hiding from a hawk, like a mouse or a toad or something, hiding from something, or when you walk up on it and your shadow passes over it and it quivers and hides, you're not called to be that. You're created to rule on the earth, to reign. You submit and fear God. Other than that, you have dominion over everything else. You have courage. Are you not commanded to be strong and courageous? That's a commandment. Do what you're told. Be strong. Be courageous. Are you not made in the image of God? God is strong and dominant and unafraid. And have an abundant life. Hey guys, just some housekeeping things. First and foremost, I don't consider this my podcast. I consider this first and foremost God's podcast and then our podcast. So there are some changes. I'm actually recording this on a computer, not my iPhone. I am trying to learn and learning, by God's grace, audio editing. So if this podcast sounds a little bit different, that's why. Hopefully it will continue to get better and better in the future. If you listen to this podcast, I'm very grateful. I consider this podcast and everything else in life belonging to God. And I thank God and my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the Good Shepherd, for everything. If you like this podcast, you may also like a few others. Simple Man Sermons and Gunfighter Life. You'll find those all under the umbrella of Good Shepherd Training. Good Shepherd Training website will be a link in the podcast. Also, Good Shepherd on Patreon. Good Shepherd Training on Instagram and Facebook. If you'd like to support this podcast or anything else that's being done, number 1, pray. Number 2, you can like, subscribe, and comment on any of these platforms. It will help others notice the podcast. If you'd like to support out in other ways, please reach out to me. You can message me directly on the website Good Shepherd Training, which I'll put a link to. You can support on Patreon, Good Shepherd Training on Patreon, or on Good Shepherd Training on Facebook. You can reach out to me there if you'd like to help support the podcast in any way. If you need prayer or I can support you in any way, please let me know. I consider this a community. I have spoken, will speak in person. If you have an event or a men's group or a church that you'd like, you think that it would be beneficial to come and speak at, please reach out to me and let me know. Or again, if you just need prayer. So again, that's Good Shepherd Training on Facebook, on Patreon, on Instagram, and on the website. Thank you for listening, and have a blessed day.